Elias felt the weight of Evelyn's words settle in his chest. I'm with you. Those 3 words meant everything, but it also meant there was no turning back now. He pulled her closer, his grip firm yet desperate. Then we have to move. Now. Without another word, they slipped into the shadows of the abandoned building where they had been hiding. The city outside was cold, its neon lights flickering in the distance, unaware of the danger closing in on them. Meanwhile, in the darkened room where the hit order had been sent, a figure sat watching the screen. Their fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing a single reply, "Consider it done." 2 assassins had already been dispatched. They knew exactly where Evelyn and Elias were, and this time there would be no escape. As Evelyn and Elias ran through the maze of alleyways, their breaths coming in short, frantic bursts, Evelyn suddenly stopped. A strange sensation crawled up her spine, a feeling she knew all too well. She was being watched. Elias noticed her hesitation. "What is it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her head slightly, her voice barely a whisper. "They're here." Before Elias could react, a gunshot rang out, shattering the silence of the night. As the gunshot echoed through the alley, time seemed to freeze for a moment. Evelyn's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, she yanked Elias forward, dragging him behind a nearby dumpster for cover. Her heart raced, not just from the near miss, but from the sharp realization that they were truly out of time. Elias quickly pressed his back against the cold metal, breathing heavily. "We need to move, Evelyn. Now." But she was already scanning their surroundings, her sharp eyes darting from one shadow to the next, trying to assess where the shot had come from. The alley was eerily quiet again, the only sound being their rapid breathing. "Too late for that," she muttered under her breath, her hand instinctively reaching for the small weapon tucked in her jacket. From the darkness ahead, 2 figures slowly emerged, their faces masked and their footsteps deliberate. The assassins were closing in. Evelyn's mind raced, calculating their next move. "On 3, she whispered, barely audible. 1, 2, 3. In an instant, she and Elias broke cover, dashing toward a narrow side street that led deeper into the city. Gunshots rang out again, but this time they were ready. Elias fired back, providing just enough of a distraction for them to gain some distance. As they ran, Evelyn's thoughts were focused on one thing: survival. The stakes had never been higher. They could no longer afford to trust anyone, and time was running out. With every step, she felt the weight of the coded message hanging over them, knowing the assassins were only the beginning. Someone powerful wanted them gone, and they wouldn't stop until it was done. The city was their maze now. The only question was whether they could find their way out before it was too late. As Evelyn and Elias sprinted through the maze of alleyways, the weight of their pursuers' footsteps echoed in the distance. They couldn't afford to stop for long. Every moment counted. The city had become a jungle, and they were both the prey and the hunters, trying to outsmart those who sought to end their lives. Evelyn's mind was sharp, scanning for any possible escape route. They needed a place to regroup, a place where they could decode the message and understand who was pulling the strings. A nearby building caught her attention, a half-collapsed structure with broken windows and overgrown vines crawling up its walls. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. "Up there," she said, pointing toward the building. "We can use the upper floor to hide. It's not perfect, but it's the best we've got." Elias nodded, his face grim. "Let's move." They rushed toward the building, weaving in and out of shadows to stay out of sight. As they approached the structure, the sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. They had little time. Evelyn pushed the door open, wincing as it creaked on its hinges, and they slipped inside. The air inside was thick with dust, and the decay of the building was apparent. But it was quiet, and that was all that mattered. They quickly made their way up the stairs, reaching the second floor. The windows were cracked, letting in just enough light for them to see. Evelyn pulled the coded message from her jacket pocket, her fingers trembling slightly. It was now or never. She needed to crack it. "Do you think we can trust the message?" Elias asked, his voice tense. Evelyn glanced up at him, her expression determined. "We don't have a choice. It's the only lead we have." She unfolded the paper, staring at the sequence of numbers and letters that seemed to mock her. She didn't know if it was a cipher or something else, but the urgency of their situation left little room for doubt. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. Suddenly, a faint sound caught her attention. A click, followed by the unmistakable sound of a door being kicked open. The assassins had found them. Time was up. "Get ready," Evelyn whispered, her hand closing around the small weapon once again. "We're not going down without a fight." As the sound of the door creaking open grew louder, Evelyn and Elias instinctively crouched low, their bodies pressed against the wall, trying to remain as silent as possible. The air was thick with tension, the faintest noise feeling like a betrayal. They knew the assassins were closing in and there was no more time to strategize. Their options had narrowed to survival, and survival meant making a stand. Evelyn's mind raced. The weapon she held in her hand was small, but it was reliable, just enough to give them a fighting chance. She glanced at Elias, who met her gaze, his eyes sharp, understanding the gravity of the situation. They couldn't run anymore. It was time to fight back. The footsteps of the assassins grew louder, each step echoing in the silent building. Evelyn counted silently, her grip tightening on the weapon. They were right outside the door now. "On my signal," she whispered. "We take them out quickly." Elias nodded, his breath shallow, his entire body tense. The door burst open and two masked figures stepped into the room, their guns raised. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She sprang into action, moving with practiced precision, her first shot taking down one of the attackers. Elias followed suit, his shot grazing the other assassin's shoulder, sending him stumbling back. The battle was swift but fierce. Adrenaline coursed through their veins as they moved in sync, each anticipating the other's next move. But the assassins were skilled, and the fight was far from over. The remaining assassin lunged forward, his gun aimed at Elias. In a split second, Evelyn acted, tackling the assassin to the ground, her weapon raised. She could feel the struggle, the fight for control, but she had the upper hand. With one final, decisive move, she pressed the barrel of her gun against the assassin's head. "Tell me who sent you," she demanded, her voice cold and fierce. The assassin's eyes flickered with defiance, but he was out of options. "You're already dead," he muttered through gritted teeth, a final threat hanging in the air. Evelyn hesitated for just a moment, her finger on the trigger, before she made a decision. With a swift motion, she knocked the assassin out cold, choosing to leave him alive. For now. They had bigger problems to deal with. Breathing heavily, Evelyn turned to Elias. "We need to get out of here. Now." He nodded, his face pale but resolute. "Where to next?" Evelyn looked at the coded message again, her mind working quickly. "There's a safe house in the outskirts of the city. We'll decode the message there." With one final glance back at the unconscious assassin, they ran for the exit. They had survived this encounter, but the bigger threat loomed ahead. And they were getting closer to the truth, whether they were ready for it or not.